This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. With me this week, two just stupendous individuals that I know in my life. I'm blessed to know. Kara Shimborski.
Hey.
And René Rodriguez.
What it do?
Thank you both for joining me on this episode. I'm super excited. I'm feeling a little slap happy given the last 10 minutes before we started recording, so I'm really excited about this episode. So let me ask the question that I ask every single week. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, René.
I've been busy, but good. Comic books are always the bright light in a very sort of regular cloudy day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a little bit of sun, but just a little bit of cloud, and comics just kind of push the clouds out of the way, all the way. This metaphor got weird. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, comics are great. I actually haven't been reading that much lately, but then this past week I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go get me some comics, and it was a good time. I got Tom Taylor's new Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 1 and 2, and it's dope.
Nice.
It's fantastic. A lot of good moments between Spider-Man and Johnny Storm, and it's a fun read. The colors are great. I really love the lettering and the panel shapes of it. Paneling's brilliant. It's a good book.
Yeah,
great.
I've heard some good stuff. This is the new series after Chip Zdarsky took over, right? So this is after Chip Zdarsky's run on it. This is Tom Taylor's new stab at Spider-Man.
Yes, yeah, and it's separate from Amazing Spider-Man, which is Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley, which is a whole separate thing, and they're taking over from Dan Slott, and they were I think Chip Zdarsky was doing Spectacular Spider-Man.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
And so this is and they actually go into it at the end of the first issue. They're like, why do we need another Spider-Man book? Because Spider-Man is amazing. That's why, people. If you don't think so, fight me. Whatever. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. We don't have to fight. Spider-Man wouldn't want that.
Correct.
But it's fun.
Yeah. Well, cool. I haven't read a Spider-Man comic in a very long time, and you are kind of my go-to, is Spider-Man still good person? So let me ask that question. Is Spider-Man still good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's great. He's just doing his
Spider-Man's
best.
always such a good boy.
Yes. I mean are the comics good?
So for Amazing Spider-Man, the tone kind of shifted a little bit, and it's not bad. It's just different. It takes some getting used to. But I think that they've established now what they're going to do with the series, and so I'm just really excited to see what Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley are going to do with that. Now, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man establishes itself just first off as very different, and it's got that more of kind of what Hawkeye and She-Hulk and the Ant-Man series from a couple years ago, that kind of superheroes doing stuff outside of being a superhero, but there's still some superhero stuff in it. That kind of
fun.
I like to refer to it as the Manic Monday kind of series. And this is actually because there was a series that I read back when I was in middle school. It was a Spider-Man series, and it was a 3-part series called Just Another Manic Monday. And all these series kind of have that same kind of feel to it. So I'm like, oh yeah, it's another Manic Monday book. But it's great. It's funny. It's got Mondays kind of vibe, but also it's just... It's fun.
But it's also a Spider-Man book, right?
Yeah, it's also a Spider-Man book. So, I mean, the quips are great. Moments are fantastic. It's good. It's it's like the fun mom of comic books. You're just kind of glad she's there at the party.
Cool. Well, Kara, how about you? How have you been? How have comic books been? What have you been reading?
How have I been? Well, Mike, it's so kind of you to ask because this episode is releasing on February 13th, which is my birthday. So, surprise! It's my birthday episode.
That's me if I had a horn.
So I'm a year older. Thank you for asking.
And another year
happy
wiser.
early birthday.
Well, this episode is releasing on my birthday, so you should be saying happy birthday. Thank you.
Yes, happy birthday to be canonically on time.
Felicidades.
Oh, gracias. So, for my birthday episode book, I read Prince of Cats by Ronald Wimberley, which Tia recommended to, I think, all of us a million years ago.
Yeah.
And I impulse bought it, but then didn't read it for 6 months. So I finally read it, and it lives up to the hype that she gave it. Prince of Cats is Romeo and Juliet, but focusing on Tybalt. and set in 1980s Brooklyn, and everyone is part of this like samurai fighting, ninja fighting thing. So like all the sword fighting is with katanas, and like all the Shakespearean dialogue has been updated to be more like early hip hop rap inspired, so it like fits the atmosphere a little bit better.
But it still has that like Shakespearean feel to it, right? It's all written in iambic pentameter, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's just like some of the dialogue is updated to reference Coney Island and the LIRR and stuff like that. So it's great. Tia's right. It's totally worth your money and time. And it's just like I read it and I feel like I need to read it like 5 more times to really get at what's happening. But it did reaffirm for me what I knew to be true when I first read Romeo and Juliet as a middle schooler, which is Tybalt is the best. He's he's this eloquent, like snotty, firebrandy idiot who likes getting into fights. He's basically like, if we're casting Romeo and Juliet characters as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he's Raphael. So obviously I like him. So I really enjoyed the book. The colors are really bright and saturated, but a lot of the action takes place at night, so there's a lot of just like dark backgrounds, but the characters are illuminated by all this all these like I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking these like purples and pinks and blues to make this really this atmosphere that feels like you should be watching an old school music video, but it's a comic.
Yeah, a lot of neon colors in that book that make everything pop, especially the action.
Yeah,
I read that book recently as well because I saw that Tia was on Slim's podcast Faves, and they were talking about that, and I was like, well, I got to read this before I listen to that episode. And yeah, I recently read that as well. I enjoyed bits and pieces of it. I think I think it warrants another read on my part.
For sure.
But it's very fun, very beautiful book.
I just can't get over thinking of like Raphael saying things as Tybalt. But like, the voice actor that voiced Raphael in like the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, just like with a hard Brooklyn accent, and he's just like,
this does take place in Brooklyn.
I know, because he's like, he's just got it, but then he's also just like, as I hate death, and I can't even do it. I can't even go through it.
I know what you're getting at, Renee. I like it.
I like it.
Well, for me, I've been pretty all right, hanging out. I haven't read a lot of comics, but I did sit down and I've been trying to finish Harlem Hellfighters, which we talked about last week. But on a whim, I was like, oh, I've got all these Rick and Morty comics that I've just been sitting on for a while. So I read through my backlog of Rick and Morty issues number 37 through 45. I don't really want to go into the story plot pieces of that because it's kind of like, if you're not reading Rick and Morty, you're not going to get any of it. But if you are a fan of Rick and Morty, I really can't recommend this comic enough. I enjoy the Rick and Morty show. I'm not one of those people that's like, this is the smartest television show that's ever been made. Look at the way that it points at pop culture. Like, I'm not going to do that because I think it has its own flaws and stuff. But that being said, it is a fun little comedy. And the comics, this is like Kyle Starks, Teenie Howard, handful of artists, and I feel like a couple of other people also wrote some little short stories in these. It all takes that feeling of goofiness and like sarcastic cynicism that is Rick and Morty and really, really nails it. I think Kyle Starks really has a voice, or he really gets like the voice of all of the characters down really, really well. And his co-writers as well, Teenie Howard, Mags Visaggio, like all sorts of people that have been on this book, they all get it. And 45 issues later, I'm still into it. I'm still digging every single issue. Rick and Morty comics, really, they just work for me. I don't know what it is. But I think I had like a whole bunch of issues to catch up on, and it was kind of nice to just have some laughs at 1 a.m. while I was just sitting and reading comics. So, yeah, Rick and Morty comics are a lot of fun. I don't know if you guys read or watch that show or into that stuff at all, but of all the licensed comics out there, this is the one that I enjoy the most.
I don't know. I just feel like there's so much weird negativity around that show, so totally. I just never started watching it because that didn't appeal to me.
Yeah,
I understand the show itself has like you said, there's some really witty, relevant parts, but I feel like there's this miasma of toxicity around it that I just don't want to get involved with.
Yeah, and this is why
Sorry,
it
sounded really snobbish, but
no,
true.
It's totally true, because this is why I like distance myself from it. I don't really like talking about Rick and Morty with anyone. I just want to enjoy it for myself. I don't want to read anything anybody has to say about it. I just kind of want to take it in my own way.
You know what? That's fair too. You don't have to be part of a fandom to be a fan.
Exactly. Well, anyways, let's talk about comics that are coming out this upcoming week. Comic books are dropping in the United States on February 13th, 2019. What are you both excited for this week? Let's start with you, Kara.
Wonder Twins #1 from DC Comics.
Why do you say it like that?
Because it's the Wonder Twins from, like, my experience of the Wonder Twins is watching the Super Friends reruns on Cartoon Network in the 90s, and they're like the dweeby teenage aliens who are part of the Super Friends, and they have these rings and they've got these powers, and so they'll put their rings together and say Wonder Twin powers activate, and like one of them can turn into any form of water and one of them can turn into any animal. And like this was obviously parodied to great effect on Family Guy a few times. And my other experience with the Wonder Twins was they were brought into the mid-2000s run of Teen Titans, but like as part of the gritty reboot, and they have this Wonder Dog, but Wonder Dog was like evil and like totally ate one of them, and there was this really really carnage-filled spread about it, and I was like, no, like this is like, no, like you don't have to gritty up the Wonder Twins, like calm the fuck down.
Yeah.
So
I thought you meant the cartoon.
No!
And then I was like, oh yeah, that happened in the comics.
No, it was the comics, Renee, not the cartoon. Oh my god. So, apparently, DC has decided that it is time once more for us to all collectively enjoy the Wonder Twins. But the solicit for the first issue seems sort of promising. It sounds like they're sort of letting them be dweeby alien teenagers, and they're just like going to high school in Metropolis, and Superman's keeping an eye on them. And I'm like, okay, all right. As long
sounds
as
like fun.
Yeah, that sounds delightful. Like, just don't let one of them get mauled by Wonder Dog again, please. That was really scarring.
Who's writing that book, Kara?
Oh, God. I didn't even look. I just saw the title, and I was like, oh, so that one.
This is Mark Russell with art by Stephen Byrne. And I don't know either of those names, but I do like the cover of this book. So
yeah, it looks cute.
I remember I saw the writer explaining like what he was going to do with the series like months ago. I don't even remember where, but I was like, all right, I see you.
Yeah,
I'm actually all for the Wonder Twins, and it's purely because they showed up in an episode of Smallville, I think in like season 9.
Oh my god.
And they made them dope. They were great. And they weren't like Wonder Twins activate, they just went activate and they like just fist bumped, and then it was
all
dope.
right.
It was great. I would watch that episode of Smallville. I don't remember what it was, but
listen, I'm like, bring back the Wonder Twins. Let's do it. Like, they're the minor characters that will never die because so many people just kind of like have an awareness of them. They're like weirdly one of the, like, I'm waiting for DC to make a movie out of them because they're actually two of the characters that people probably like recognize, even if they don't quite know why. Kind of like Aquaman. Like, who knew anything about Aquaman except for what you saw in Super Friends? It's the same thing with Wonder Twins. Let's give the Wonder Twins their own Wet Thor version movie.
See, this is exactly where I'm coming from because I've never read or seen anything with the Wonder Twins, but I know exactly what they can do.
Yeah.
Like, something in my life, in my 30 years of living, like, I witnessed something with the Wonder Twins and was like, they can turn into dogs?
See, it's like embedded in everyone's subconscious. Like, DC needs to monetize this crap. Like, give us a Wonder Twins movie.
Right.
I'm ready. Let's jump that shark. Let's do it.
I love it. Oh, man. Renee, what are you excited for this upcoming week?
Well, now I'm excited for Wonder Twins, but...
Thank you.
No, I'm always excited for manga, and this week it was really hard, because it's always hard trying to talk about manga on this show. Not because you guys are mean, but because I don't want to spoil things.
Right, because I know you want me to read this book that you're going to talk about right now, and I'm only 2 volumes in.
Oh, I actually chose this because I was like, oh, you know what, I should choose Haikyuu, and then I ended up reading it, and then I was like, oh, balls. Well, I can't say what I'm excited for now because I already read it.
Oh my God.
And
okay.
It's so good though. And then I didn't want to do My Hero Academia because Mike's still not caught up. I don't want to spoil
what
it.
did you choose, Renee?
What did you pick? Just talk about what you picked.
I picked Black Clover, chapter 192. We're not even at 200 chapters yet, and things are nuts. And this is a book by Yuki Tabata. It's amazing. It's fantastic, and it is go time. We are now at like a very classic sort of staple in manga where they're chasing after the bad guy, and they have to try and get to the final one, but they're like, oh, guess what? He's got like 6 captains. But we have 6 members on our team. Are we going to split up and fight them? You're darn tootin' you are. So, I'm excited.
I read Bleach too.
Renee,
Yeah.
I have a question. You said it's not even chapter 200 and things are getting real. Is chapter 200 like about the time when things usually get real in manga?
I mean, generally, yeah. So, like, 200 chapters is a huge thing. Like, 100 chapters is really big. And so, like, there's a lot of series that don't get over 100 chapters. And so they end up having, like the big ones, the big rounded numbers as huge things. And if they get there, that's generally when they try to do a huge push for the series. So if you, like, walk into any manga series and you're like, oh, if it's going to be around chapter 100, chapter 150, chapter 200, that's generally where there's a big shift in the arc and things, like, get really serious.
So, Renee, for those of us who don't regularly read manga, with these chapters... Renee.
Oh, come on.
So
come on, Renee.
With these chapters, that's like not the full like manga that we think of when we in America think of manga. That's like there's like 6 or 7 chapters in one of the books.
Yes.
So 200 would be like 12 of those.
Hold on.
Something like that.
It kind of varies.
Around that?
I'll speak
It's
to Renee a little bit.
It's definitely
here.
more than that because I own.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to figure out, like, for a new reader, you saying chapter 192, I'm like, I'm not reading it like 200 chapters of something to get caught up. But, like, if it's, like, a more manageable chunk, because, like, I can knock out a manga if I'm not paying too close attention to it in, like, an hour or 2. So if you say like, oh, that's like 12 manga, I'm like, cool. Next time I have like $100 to drop on books, I'll just bomb through that. Like that feels more manageable for when I have money to burn, which sometimes happens, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the way that I go about it is because it is definitely more than like 12. I own the first 10 volumes of Black Clover, and I've actually like fallen off. I think they're at volume 15 in the United States. So the way that I go about it is that because they space them out from the releases of the volumes, they're like 3 months apart on release dates, so that they're like, oh, you know, you can take the time to read it. And also the books are only like $10 a piece, so it's pretty manageable, especially if you're not dropping like $80 a week on comics.
Well, I know, because when I think about it like that, I'm like, okay, so a regular, like, U.S. floppy is, what, $4 now? So for the price of 2 floppies, which is, like, 64 pages total, you're getting a manga, which is, like, over 100 pages. So it's
a manga is generally 7 to 8 chapters per volume, and each chapter is 18 to 22 pages. So you're getting a pretty good deal, especially since it's only for $10. But if you are subscribed to Shonen Jump, like I am, you can get the weekly updates. So they come out with chapters weekly unless like there's a holiday or if the writer's on break. And so you can get a simulcast with Japan. So the same day that it's released in Japan, it's released here. You can get it on your app, on the computer, on your phone. And so you can read it. And they also have a new deal with Shonen Jump where you can actually read all the old chapters. So if you spend like $25 for the whole year, you can literally just take your time, go through the series, and then catch up.
So that's super cost effective then.
Oh yeah, it's $2 a month to read any English released chapter that's ever been made, pretty much by Shonen. For the most, like that's been released digitally. It's a wild deal.
Yeah.
And they're still updating constantly. True, like they're still uploading the things that they have translated to it. So there are certain series where you're like, oh yeah, all of it's on there, and like some of it is like only partially on there, but it gets you into it, and you can just wait for the updates. So when I'm saying that like I'm excited for this chapter, that's because I'm reading the weeks, so I'm going by. But I am also buying the tankobons, but it's easier to be like, oh, this is the chapter that's coming out because it's similar to a single issue or a floppy, as you say.
No, this is fascinating. We're learning about a new section of comics that we don't often talk about.
I feel like we talk about it every time I'm on here.
Well, Renee, that's what happens when you develop a niche.
Yeah, hey, and it's interesting. I mean, I think we've talked about little pieces of it here and there, but to Kira's point, I think it's something to remind people that, hey, like, you can get into manga pretty easily. Shonen Jump and like Sheshwa in Japan, they make it really easy to get into a lot of their stuff for a very, very low cost if you don't want to try to track down books at the library. Like me trying to get Black Clover, for instance, was really, really tough at the library because they didn't have all of them. They only had the first 3 volumes in their whole circulation. I know there's more volumes than that.
Yeah.
But me getting this subscription means that I can just read Black Clover from pretty much beginning to end on their app, chapter by chapter, which is really nice, and download it to my phone and keep them offline and stuff. It's really nice.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't know if Shoujo does that, because like it's all technically through Viz, but like they have separate stuff through like Shoujo Beat. They have Shonen Sunday. They have Seinen Magazine. So Shonen Jump is where the deal is right now, but like you can still like it's really accessible to get all their books through them. And then Kodansha is another one that is also really nice too, but they don't have that same kind of service.
Yeah, I mean, but they do offer week to week. If you want to buy them digitally, you can buy them through Comixology or through the Kodansha website. And this is the publisher who makes like Attack on Titan and a couple of other pretty big name ones that are out there.
Yeah, and like the issue that you can buy per weekly, I think it's also still cheaper than like buying a floppy.
Yeah, definitely.
But Mike, what did you read this week?
Well, what I'm excited for this week is Age of X-Men Nextgen #1. I'm going to be talking about these Age of X-Men books for the next couple of weeks. I'm sorry, everyone. This is Ed Brisson and Marcus Toe. This is actually one of the miniseries in the Age of X-Men big event that's happening in the X-Men books that I'm really excited about. The reason why this issue focuses on some of my favorite backseat characters, I want to call them, some of the student characters that don't get a lot of major press in the books, and they kind of, building up to Age of X-Men, it seemed like Kelly Thompson, Ed Brisson, and Lonnie Nadler and Zach Thompson, all the people that were involved in building this whole series up, or this event up, they were like, hey, we're going to focus not only on the big names, your Nightcrawlers, your Kitty Prydes, we're also going to focus on Glob Thurman, who is the see-through man, who's just a big pink blob and you can see his skeleton, or Armor, who is the girl who can make like crazy weird plasma armor around her body, or Enoll, who is strong and looks like a lizard, ? I don't know all of his powers. And Rockslide, who's just a giant rock man. These are characters I fell in love with during the New X-Men Academy X era of X-Men books. Right after Grant Morrison's New X-Men, there was like this book that focused on just the kids in the school, and like X-23 showed up, and Hellion, and there was a whole bunch of these students that were kind of the core cast of characters, and they kind of fell to the wayside, and they had some moments where they were brought up, but they never had a focused book. And Age of X-Men Next Gen is going to be all about them, and apparently this book is going to be about what is maybe not so great about living in this utopia of Age of X-Men, where, for those of you not following Age of X-Men, everybody's a mutant and everything's good for mutants, kind of, for the most part. Like, mutants are all like the popular race, and everybody wants to be a mutant and hang out with mutants, and there's a cool school, and they're all respected, but there's some very strange, weird things happening in the background that we have yet to fully discover, and we saw a preview of that in the Age of X-Men one-shot that came out, I think, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe.
I gotta say, yeah. Mike, I really like books like this, like what you're describing, where they focus on, we'll call them C or D list characters.
Sure.
Because, like, they're the ones that usually end up getting actual character development. Like, all of the top name characters for DC and Marvel, nothing ever really truly changes the status quo for them, because they're a valuable IP and they need to keep making money on merchandise and movies and stuff. But the less quote unquote popular characters at the big two, when they get focused on, things can actually happen to them because like the companies don't really care. So I always personally find those stories much more interesting than
I'm
the
right
headliners. Yeah,
and I think that there has been a screaming fan base around some of these characters, particularly Glob Thurman, who really want to see some character development, really want to see these characters being used as more than just a punchline. Because Glob Thurman is always kind of depicted in the comics as like this weird creeper, because you can always see where his eyes are and where they're looking. And he's always had like just like one-off side moments where he gets a panel or he gets like maybe half a page. And the fact that this book was referenced in the one shot that leads up to this whole event, as saying, you want to know what Glob's up to? Check out this book. Which I'm like, hell yeah, I want to know what Glob's up to. You tell me what Glob's up to. I also just like saying his name because it's a goofy name.
It is a goofy name.
But yeah, so I'm really excited for this book. I think this is going to be one of the more fun miniseries. Ed Brisson, he is one of the people that is on all of the X-Men books right now, and I haven't read a bad book by him. So I'm really excited to see what he does with all of these misfit youngsters, because they are the best. I love them so much. They are my favorite babies that go to school.
If there was a romance novel written based on this series, it would be called Glob the Heartthrob.
Before we start our episode this week, I have to do a couple shout-outs to the fantastic human beings out there who went to our Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast and decided that they wanted to become a regular backer of this show. So shout-outs to Keith, shout-outs to Kyle, and shout-outs to Tom. You guys are absolutely amazing, and oh my goodness, we have some fantastic content coming just for you Patreon subscribers. Actually, I think in like a week, we have our first episode of a new thing coming out, so get hyped. If you haven't already, go over to patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Even if you back us at the lowest $2 tier, you get access to all this brand new Patreon-only content. It's fantastic. But let's move on from there. Let's actually talk about what we're here to talk about this week, which is food in manga. It's such a broad topic. I had to ask a million questions before we actually started recording this second half of the show to say we're going to talk about what makes food in manga great, what makes it bad, when do we like it, when don't we like it, why is it awesome, and why is it such a big deal in manga. There's so many food things in manga, and we're here to talk about all of it, which is why we have our resident manga expert on the show, René, as well as me. I read quite a bit of manga myself, so let's ask that big question. What makes manga so great when it comes to food? Like, there are whole manga just about food. René, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with food in manga?
Yes, well, I have read manga, obviously.
Thank you. Kara, could you tell us? No, I'm kidding. René, tell us about some of this stuff.
Well, I think that, so food is it's a really big part of any culture, because food's it's delicious, and that's also how you get nutrients and things like that.
Right.
And so it's kind of important, and most of the time, manga artists, they don't really like to skimp on anything when they're drawing, and I think food is also really important. And I think it also comes back to sort of like the way food's depicted in other art. Like, if you ever watch like one of those stop motion like movies, like any of the Christmas ones, like whenever you see someone bite into a cookie, you're like, oh man, that's the perfect bite. I want every cookie I bite into to be like that. And I think it comes into that same way with manga. When you see a character eating food, you want it to be appetizing, not just for the character, but for whoever's reading it. Mm-hmm. And I think that it just, it's almost like eating vicariously through the character as well. But I also just think it's just to show off that, like, yeah, I can draw this. This is, I don't want to do anything half-assed.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things I noticed when I first started reading like more manga beyond just Bleach, for instance, right? Bleach is maybe a bad example for food in manga, even though it's like kind of a small piece of it. But I started reading Delicious in Dungeon, which, I've talked about on the show a million times. But the thing that makes this book so unique and totally blew my mind was there's kind of this cartoony style to the whole book, and everything's like very nice. And not to say that it's it's bad by any means, but there's not like a ton of detail done to all the characters, and it's got like what you would think of a manga would look like. But there are some moments where you can see the intricate detail that the artist put into this. This is by Ryoko Kui, and the food by itself is like a standalone. I could rip that out of the book and put it on my wall. It's so beautifully drawn. But the rest of it is very simple line art in some cases, a lot of action and stuff. But whenever the food is depicted, it is pristine. And I've always wondered, like, why that's such a big deal, because after I started noticing it in Delicious in Dungeon, I started to notice there are tons of other manga that do this exact same thing. Even when the comic's not even about food, they'll spend a ton of time making sure that that shot of, you know, the rice bowl with the katsu on top and the, you know, all that stuff, it looks pristine. And then they'll go back to doing like goofy jokes in the next page. And it's such an interesting thing. I've always wanted to just point that out because it's such a thing that happens in comics. It's always impressed me.
Well, the thing is, the difference, I think, between food in manga and food in other comic forms is that in manga, they take time to showcase the food, usually in its own panel. Like someone opens their bento box lunch and there's like a full panel just dedicated to how beautiful and sparkling that food looks. And I think that's the difference, because like maybe characters in Western comics will be shown eating, or maybe there'll be food shown, but Japanese manga, like you said, so like noticeably way more than Western comics, takes time to highlight that food and to celebrate that food. And I think some of it is just, I think there's more attention to aesthetic when it comes to food in Japanese culture than in American culture. Like there's, you know, if you go into like a Japanese 100 yen store or something, you can get like little molds for like turning your rice into different shapes, and you can like make sushi with different like little shape cutouts and stuff. And it's just like you can get like a little hot dog slicer that turns your little hot dogs into octopi. Like there's all this stuff to make your food look cute. So it's not surprising to me that that is reflected in the manga. My first, like the first time I think I really noticed food in manga was in Sailor Moon, because that's how Sailor Moon and Sailor Jupiter became friends, because Sailor Moon loves to eat food, and she, like, Sailor Jupiter was like the new girl at school. She's like taller than everyone, so she's still wearing her old uniform, so she just looks different from everyone. But Sailor Moon notices that she like opens her lunchbox and has like the most beautiful food spread, so you're just like zooming in on how gorgeous this food looks, because Sailor Moon's like salivating over it. And she comes over to Sailor Jupiter and is like, oh my god, your food looks so good, let's be friends. And so they become friends because she wants to eat the delicious food that Sailor Jupiter like packed for herself. And I'm just like, you started a friendship over food. Relatable.
right.
I mean, I kind of also think that like maybe it's the artist living vicariously through like what they want to eat, because like especially mangaka starting out, they're like kind of poor, then like they don't really make a lot of money at first unless the series is a huge hit. So I think maybe they're just drawing all the things they want to eat, and they're just like, yeah. And maybe there's steam coming out of, oh, what if there's a sauce and there's a side of rice, and they're just like, you know, they probably ruin a couple manuscripts just from drooling.
Yeah.
They
themselves become cartoons.
I'm like thinking about the food in manga and I'm drooling right now. It's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna like have to go out and get sushi after this. This is not okay.
Well, see, this is why like I've always seen that Food Wars manga, right? I know that's a pretty big food manga. It's all about like being a chef and competitive cooking and all this kind of stuff. And it's even the covers of this book, they're showing like these manga style characters serving this very intricately drawn fish dish on the cover, and it's way more detailed than the rest of the cover itself, but the food itself is like, it's the big selling point. And obviously for a food manga you want to do that, but I've seen that even in manga like Drops of God, which is all about wine. This is a manga that's all about trying these different wines and stuff. Maybe I brought this up on the show before, but when the character goes into discussing how the wine tastes, not only is the like atmosphere of whatever they're describing very, very intricately drawn, like a nice forest with a lush tree and there's moss growing on this side, and served on top of a tree trunk is like this delicious gourmet meal with, it's got liver in it and there's onions and oh wait, there's also some flowers and all. It's like way more detailed than the rest of the manga. And not to say that that's a simplistic manga by any means, but comparatively, those images that are shown, like it must take them whole days just to draw those 2-page spreads compared to the rest of the chapter that they were writing. It always blows my mind. Like it must be something. There's definitely something there to be said. Like that there is so much care put into it to make you not only read the descriptions of these things, but also you get a full picture of what they're actually trying to portray, and more so than just using the words to describe it. Something that we always talk about works really well in comics is the imagery, and it's like, if you're really trying to sell this food or whatever you're trying to sell, like these intricate drawings can just blow your mind and make an entire volume of a manga volume worthwhile.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird because it's not like for advertising or anything. Like they don't, most of the time they don't specify like, hey, this is at this shop that I like to go to, and like most of the time it's just kind of like they make up their own thing. But it's actually kind of funny. So in a manga called Hikaru no Go, there's a water bottle that one of the characters drinks out of, and it's an actual like real brand, and like the artist was just like, oh, I drink this brand, so I'm going to put it on the bottle. And then the company actually noticed and sent the mangaka like a couple bottles of it, and they're like, "Hey, thanks for the shout out." But that normally doesn't happen, so they're just like, it's not for ad; they're just doing it for the heck of it.
Right?
Goofy.
I'm hungry now, you guys.
I know. Not eating before this was a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I did eat before this. I gotta tell you, Mike, you really sold me on this Drops of God series that you were just talking about.
So, so the most unfortunate, I realize this isn't, one of the strongest topics that we've had on the show, but I'm totally fine with talking about some of the manga that involved this, because I think it's, people should be reading more manga in general. I think if you're a comics fan, manga definitely works. It's just slightly different than what you're used to. But Drops of God...
100% agree.
Drops of God is the most unfortunate series in the world, because
Why?
I think it's... the reason being is there's only 4 volumes out of the, I think, 22 volumes published in English, and they don't print them anymore, right? Like, this was a series that didn't do well, I think, when they brought it over to America, and so we're potentially never going to see them actually published in English beyond the 4 volumes that came out. And the worst part about it is, the first 3 volumes are actually the first 3 volumes in the series, and the 4th volume is volume 13 or something, because they were like, oh no, the story actually kicks it up a notch in volume 13, so let's put that out as volume 4. But they don't call it volume 4. It's such a cool series, teaching you about how to drink wine and where wine comes from and what makes it interesting, why, a wine from the north part of France tastes different than the south side of France, even though they are made from the same grapes.
It's called terroir, Mike. I want to read this series. Do I have to learn Japanese to do it?
No. Well, I mean, the first 4 volumes are out there. I don't know if they're sold digitally. You might be able to get them at the library, but it's such a cool series. I haven't been able to find any more. And the publisher that was making it or bringing it over from Japan, Vertical, is kind of I think they're still publishing stuff, but I think they're publishing less, and Drops of God, I think, didn't make the cut. So, I don't know. Maybe there are English versions out there. I don't want to advocate for piracy, because you totally shouldn't pirate comics, but, I don't know how else to get this series, and I'm super hooked on it. It's on my bookshelf right now, and I'm just so bummed that I can't read it. But, honestly, the art is gorgeous, and then there's these very detailed pages that are just mind-blowing.
Well, because it sounds like it's one of those books that's also sort of teaching you while you're reading a story, which is my favorite kind of comic.
Which is manga in general. They're trying to teach you all the time. That's why there's these huge spreads of just words, because they're like, this is how it actually works, even if it's a made-up system.
But that's great. Oh man, this is I want to learn stuff, but I want to not realize that I'm learning stuff because I'm so entertained.
Oh man, Kara, you need to read Dr. Stone then. Holy cats.
So, Drops of God is interesting because I think that the story on the whole is pretty standard, right? The story is... I'm just going to go into
are
this.
Standard. There's so many, every story is from a basic template of humanity and stories that we've done. It's all about the details that make the
But I should say it does follow the standard shonen tropes, right? There is a character who isn't a part of a world, and then he's forced into that world, and he has to compete with someone who's his greatest rival, and if they both, they're both on basically a race to try to figure out this thing, and whoever gets there first inherits $1 billion. That's the story, or the main character's dad's estate. He was one of the greatest wine tasters in the world, and his protege is competing with his son, and turns out all of his son's his whole upbringing made him this great wine taster, and so they're both trying to find these quote unquote drops of God, which is the greatest wine that this wine taster had ever tasted, and the 13 apostles or 12 apostles, which are the 12 other great wines, and they're from all over the world, from Australia to California to France and Italy, and all these people apparently in this guy's life all have different takes and thoughts about different wines, and so he learns about wines as you, the reader, are learning about wines, and his best friend is this young girl who's a sommelier in training. It's got all this really fun stuff in it, but I don't know if it was that popular.
I'm in.
It's really good.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm so in. By the way,
I've mentioned. Yeah, go on.
It's now, I think it's owned by Kodansha Comics now, and there's actually another volume past Volume 4 that is out, and it's available on Kindle, Comixology, and all these other things. It's called Drops of God Volume New World. So
yeah, that's the 4th volume, I think.
no, because Volume 4 is I'm looking at it. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it says
more, Mike.
The Drops of God Volume New World. So
you're changing my brain. This is amazing.
yeah, literally.
So, Mike,
just Kodansha.
You had mentioned Food Wars, Mike, and that one I actually have a passing awareness of because my best friend, who doesn't usually read manga or comics, found that because she loves food so much, and she like her hobby is like baking stuff and cooking, and like she's the person who introduced me to Great British Bake Off. And I know she is a devoted Food Wars reader, and when she gets a new volume, she'll text me and be like, I'm so hungry. Because it's like you said, like just there's so much detail paid attention to how the food is being depicted, which is great because this is a wholly visual medium. So how do you convey how delicious something is supposed to be if the reader can't smell it or taste it, which are usually the senses that we associate with food? So that you put all of this insane detail into presenting the food in the most flattering way possible.
Yeah. And also Shokugeki no Soma also goes even beyond. I'm sorry. That is the name for Food Wars in Japanese. It just slipped out. I'm a weeaboo. I'm sorry.
You gotta just mumble through
René.
it too. I was like, what is he talking about? What is he talking about?
The series is called Shokugeki no Soma, and a Shokugeki is the actual like battle that they do at the school. So that's what the Food War is. In the series, it's called a Shokugeki, and the main character's name is Soma. So it's basically saying like Soma does Food Wars kind of thing.
Gotcha.
But so in the series, they go even beyond just like drawing it and looking at it or whatever. They show you all the prep work that they did, and then they also have people that taste the food, and they explain it to you with just great detail. And they explain like how the meat is, what the flavors are in the sauces, the texture of it, so that you sort of get an even better feeling of what it's supposed to feel like and taste like in your mouth while also looking at it. And they also like do these close-ups of them cutting it or whatever, and if there's something inside like if there's like a sauce or a yolk inside it, like they'll show it break and there's like a beam of light. It's a real production. Man. But
I should have eaten before I started this episode too, man. This was a bad idea today, guys.
And then this is the main thing that got Shokugeki on the map, especially in the internet, is that whenever something's really good, it knocks people's clothes off.
Oh,
and they have kind of like a sexual experience because they taste it, and then in the anime it's really bad. So like don't crank the volume on it because they're just all like.
Oh no. Okay. All right. Well,
it's very
reader
weird.
Beware, I guess.
Yeah, and this is a shonen series. This show comes up in Shonen Jump, which is like, it's not a seinen magazine, but it's like, yo, like, chill out.
There are children reading this.
I know.
Exactly.
Like, I thought it was a seinen magazine because my friend told me about it, and then I read it. He's like, look, it's weird. There's a lot of weird descriptions, and there's a lot of semi-nakedness, but it's good, I swear. And he's and he's right. And you know what? It's still one of my weekly mangas that I read that I'm current on. It's good.
Gotcha.
I don't know. I kind of get the it's kind of like an overt visual thing to like have people's clothes knocked off so that they can show them having kind of like this sexual experience while eating food, but also like that's kind of not far off the mark. Like if you have a really good meal, like it is a really like delicious carnal experience sometimes. Like maybe not quite like maybe not quite to like the knocking your clothes off level, but like, oh man, a good meal is like just the best. So if that's the like the way that they thought of to visually represent that, like that is just one of the joys of comics. You can make a visual allegory for what you're really getting at.
One of my favorite ones, there's a character who like he keeps his clothes on, but if it's really good and he feels that it's really good, all the people around him will have their clothes knocked off.
Oh my goodness. What?
Because the hormones, Mike.
The thing is, they're all surprised. Like they're like, what does he think? Ah, naked. It must be really good. But I mean, not all manga are like this.
You're right.
Are you sure, René?
Not all the manga I read are like this. Let me say that.
You know, René, you brought up one example that I saw that I totally forgot about, and I haven't because I haven't finished the series. But Assassination Classroom is one that I've been meaning to get back on the train for, and I forget that Koro Sensei being the iconic yellow character that you see who's out to destroy the world, but he's willing to give the world a chance if some kids will try to kill him. It's a whole weird concept. Let's just get past that. But he does enjoy food, and he does enjoy making food with all of his weird tentacles that he has, and it's always presented really, really well. And I think it's such a funny thing because he's supposed to be an alien character, and yet he recognizes that Earth has all this great food, and so he goes way out of his way sometimes in order to prepare like really, really solid meals, while these kids are also trying to kill him with these special BB guns that they have.
My favorite is when he goes somewhere else for lunchtime because he can travel at like Mach 20. So he's like, I'm going to jump over to France and get some escargot. And then he's like, oh, I hit up China on the way back, got some snacks. And he's just munching on them. But he also steals their snacks too. And they're like, Koro Sensei.
Yeah, that's a weird manga. I will say that book is just straight up weird because the concept should not work, and yet 20 volumes later, I'm like super into it still.
It's so good. That's one of those like series when you were like, every book follows a trope. I was like, dude, read Assassination Classroom because what?
True.
I gotta say, you're saying like, oh, it's so weird, like he's like hopping over the world at light speed, but you're actually describing a Winnie the Pooh Christmas story that I had as a child.
Hold on, what?
Okay, so at Ye Old Scholastic Book Fair once upon a time, I saw that there was like a Winnie the Pooh like Christmas Tales book that was for sale. So I was like, Mom, we need to get this. So my mother graciously bought it for me because she was encouraging me to read anything that I wanted to read. And it's like a collection of like 5 Christmas themed stories about like Winnie the Pooh and his friends. And so the Winnie the Pooh centric story was Winnie the Pooh like wanting a bedtime snack on Christmas Eve, realizing that he's eaten all of his honey, going to bed, and then waking up because like having eaten one of Santa's cookies because he's like, well, Santa will understand because I'm hungry. And he falls asleep in a chair in front of the fire, and Santa Claus like wakes him up, and he's like, Pooh, I have a problem. And Pooh's like, Santa Claus, what are you talking about? And Santa Claus is like, I'm full. I'm like halfway through my trip around the world to bring presents to everyone, and I'm really full. Can you come with me and eat all this food? So then the rest of the story is Pooh like eating all this food around the world in one night while Santa Claus is like delivering presents for the children. So you're like, this is weird. I'm like, what are you talking about? I read this story for like my entire childhood. This isn't weird. This is a totally legit thing. I absolutely want to travel around the world in one night eating all the food.
This sounds like a great manga. No, I mean, I know that it's not.
Definitely,
it sounds like a great manga.
Definitely an excellent one shot, if anything.
Yes. I mean, I feel like I need to bring up the thing that people are probably going to call me out on if I don't, and that's a lot of characters are actually named after food in manga.
Yeah.
Right?
Like all the characters in Dragon Ball Z.
All the characters in Dragon Ball Z?
Yeah, so Kakarot is Goku's name. Kakarot is carrot. Vegeta is vegetable. Piccolo, I think, is a Japanese word for cucumber. That's probably wrong, and people are going to let me know about it. That's cool.
Yeah,
Gohan
please let René
is
know about it.
rice.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
blowing
it's
my mind. I knew
Krillin...
about the carrot thing, but I didn't know
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, that's the one.
Raditz is radish.
Mm-hmm. And isn't Naruto? Isn't that a thing? Isn't Naruto a food as well?
Yeah, Naruto's an ingredient in ramen.
Go
Right.
back
okay.
to deconstructing my childhood. What about Dragon Ball?
Yeah.
A lot of it revolves around food.
So everyone's just talking about food the whole time.
Yeah, because originally it was kind of it was Akira Toriyama's second series, and his first series, Dr. Slump, was kind of a gag manga, and so Dragon Ball started out as kind of like this adventure, and it was kind of like a gag manga as well. So a lot of the names are puns of food.
Yeah, like I'm looking at an article right now. Like Goku, we said Kakarot is carrot, is a pun. Vegeta is vegetables. Raditz is radish. Geese, which is apparently one of the Ginyu Force.
Oh yeah.
His name is a derivative of cheese, or Jizu, which is a derivative of Chizu, which is cheese. A birder is like an offshoot of bata, which is an offshoot word for butter. Rakum, which is rikumu, is the Japanese word for cream.
Wait.
Goldo, which is Gorudo, which is derived from Yogoruto, which is yogurt. It all
Wait a
like
minute. I want to go back to Goku and Vegeta because they always had that rivalry going, and so Goku is a carrot, but Vegeta is all of the vegetables.
Yeah, because he's the prince of all Saiyans.
Because he's the king.
He's the prince of all vegetables.
Okay, this makes sense now. No wonder he's got a complex about Goku being more powerful, because he's like, no, I'm all the vegetables. All of
their
them.
planet was called Vegeta, right? Like, I mean, not to mention, like, one of the big things about Goku is that he loves to eat. Like, if we're still tying it back to food, like, all he does is eat, to the point where Chi-Chi just beats him up because he ate all the food before she actually got to sit down. Like, that's, like, a whole thing in that manga as well. I think, like, eating is a core concept in a lot of manga,
So
no matter
Brad
what
Pitt
you're
in
reading.
Ocean's 11.
Yeah, a lot of the time, the main character will have, like, an endless stomach, and so they'll eat just lots of food to, like, regain their strength. So Saiyans are also kind of basically, like, bottomless pits. So, like, there's an episode, I think, in DBZ at the, like, right before the Buu saga, where Gohan, Goku, and Vegeta sit down to eat, and they basically clean out this entire restaurant, because they're just... It's great.
That was a really accurate sound effect, René.
Yes,
thank
you, René.
Oh man, you got to get the bites right, because then you can sit down with your friends and you take that first big bite and it throws them, and it's great. It's the perfect little like how.
Well, I've decided. I said earlier that everyone should read manga, but if René is proof that you should read manga, don't, because.
Mean.
I'm kidding. I love you, René. I'm glad that you're embracing this. This is fantastic. I mean, tons of other books. Like, there's a book or series I just finished reading called Monster. There's a whole big chunk of that book, or a section of the book, dedicated to these loner characters who all came from different countries, and they all live in this kind of hostile-like place. And one of the focuses, the thing that brings them all together as a group, is that they all start making food native from their country. So, like, someone's from China, someone's from Vietnam, someone's from Poland, someone's from Hungary, and they all make food from where they come from. And so the main character in the series Monster, I should say one of the main characters, he's from Japan, and so when he ends up crashing with these people for a short while on his hunt to go kill this terrible person, because that's what the story's about, he makes them all, I think he makes tonkatsu, I think he makes some katsu of some kind, and everyone is blown away. Oh, you fry the pork and then you put it over rice, and he was like, yeah, this is a regular food. And they're like, well, you have to come back and make it for us, because there's also charming little elements like that, whereas little kids, they just love him because whatever. But food, it's a big thing. I just wanted to make sure I plugged that one because I love that series, and everyone should read Monster. It's one of the most fantastic suspense stories you can read out there. I love that book, and I just finished it. But anyways, food and manga, it's a whole thing. I don't know. Do you guys have any final thoughts about food and manga? I think we've run through things quite a bit. We know that it's intricately drawn. We know it's a very important part of culture. But what are your final thoughts here?
I've learned so much about Dragon Ball this day. Like, my
Good.
mind is still reeling.
What about you, Renee?
Well, so the last thing that I want to say about food and manga is that it also is almost like its own character in just passing through all of it, and it also kind of emphasizes on. It actually helps deepen other characters in other series, like in One Piece, which is a series about pirates who are really bad at being pirates, but they're heroes, and it's awesome, and it's great. But like the main character Luffy loves food. Specifically, he loves meat, and it's great every time he talks about it. And they have their own chef on the pirate ship, and he caters to every single person on the ship, even if they're like not part of the crew. He finds out what they like because he likes serving food that they will enjoy to them, and it's always really wonderful. And there's this part where they've got another pirate on the ship, and he's just traveling with them, and they're like arguing about something serious, and the chef's like, I'm gonna make breakfast. We're gonna have sandwiches, and they all ask for their specific sandwich. Like there's a little talking reindeer that wants cotton candy sandwich. And it's really goofy. And so they're asking, and then they're like, oh, by the way, La, what would you want? And he's like he's trying not to get caught up in their craziness. And they're just talking about it. And he finally just shouts, I don't like bread. And then he gets like he gets like super upset because he's like, no, I got caught up in their crap. No. And it's just fantastic. But, like, food also helps just explain these characters. Like, Naruto, he loves Ichiraku ramen. He loves it. It's, like, the only thing he eats. And in Black Clover, there's a character who loves food, and she's really strong, but they can't get her to do anything because she's only thinking about food. But also her magic is also food as well. Like the things that she creates, like she can do battle magic, but she also can create food for other people to eat, and it restores their mana. So it's like, oh, her entire being revolves around food. And there's all kinds of different series where they're like, oh, I didn't know this character could cook, and the character will explain why they know how to cook, and it sort of shows you another character development, like, oh, maybe they are more responsible in this way, or hey, they went without in this area, so they had to make up for it. And you just kind of learn about those things through why these people eat certain things, why they make certain things, and it all just kind of revolves around food. So it kind of becomes like its own character in every manga, and it's just really fun to see the way that people kind of play with that, because we all eat, and it's just kind of cool to see like all the ways that you can play with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum this all up, Renee. I really appreciate that, man.
Just doing my job.
Well, cool. Well, I'm going to just run through the credits now. So, if you can follow us all on Twitter, you can follow Kara at KaraSM. You can follow Renee at Rodriguer29. You can follow me at Mike Rappin. And you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast. We post things, retweet things. We've got an Instagram under the same account. So, IRCB Podcast on Instagram as well. Make sure to go follow us there.
You can check out our Goodreads group. We have weekly threads. This week's thread was Help Me Understand Heavy Vinyl. I don't even know what that's about, but I'm gonna, so you should too. Don't forget to check us out at the ircbpodcast.com, where we have our pronunciation guide and merch and lots more that you can check out.
Please rate our show, subscribe, and tell your friends. Share our good work. If you haven't rated us, why not? Please do. It helps us. Do it for my birthday. You can email the show with comments, questions, jokes, happy birthday wishes, etc. at ircb@destroythecybe.org, or subscribe on our Patreon for a birthday present for me at patreon.com/ircbpodcast, which also gives you access to exclusive audio and articles, early access to top of my pile posts, and more. Think of me. It is my birthday.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all the music for the show. Thank you guys for your continued support of I Read Comic Books. Xander, he's a fun guy, super fun person to be around. He also edits the show. I want to say thank you to Kara and Renee, and happy birthday, Kara.
Thank you.
It's today when people are listening to this.
Yes, it is. Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you. Thank you for listening. We will see you all next week.
I've got a quick question.
Yes.
Is Nathan Gray in the Age of X-Men books?
Nathan Gray is the focal character in all of the Age of X-Men books.
Then I'm getting them all. All right.
Renee, see, this is... So,
Who that?
Nate Gray, same name as Cable, he who is also called Nathan Gray. This is a different Nathan Gray. Nate Gray, also known as X-Man.
Yeah, he is.
Singular. He is a character who was born of Jean and Scott, and he was basically created during the Age of Apocalypse storyline.
Oh,
right?
I read that.
Yes. I was
That's
gonna
why
say,
his name sounds familiar.
You probably know who this character is. He has, like, infinite power because
Oh, yeah.
plot device, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
he's
Well,
the strongest character.
The prelude to this... Yeah, the prelude to this... Funny you say that, Renee, because Legion's also involved in this story.
Oh, man!
Yeah. So the prelude to this whole story, it was an Uncanny X-Men that ran for 10 weeks straight. Literally not taking a week off, where it was 10 weeks in a row of X-Men books. Or X-Men, Uncanny X-Men. Nate Gray shows up, and it turns out he's dying, and so he says, before I go, I'm going to fix the whole world. And so he creates his Horsemen of not the apocalypse, but of life. And it's Magneto, Blob, Red Omega, or Omega Red, and who was the fourth one? Angel.
Of course.
Yes, and they're going to remake the world, which is the X-Men are like, you can't just kill people who work on a big rig who are making oil. You can't just do that. And he's like, maybe I can. Sorry, go ahead. They also destroyed all of the world's popular religions, Catholicism, they destroy Mecca, they destroy Israel, they destroy Rome. Like,
It would be very unpopular.
Yeah, it's a really weird book, and it led into this whole, Legion shows up and is like, hey guys, I'm the only person that can help. So he fights Nate Gray in a mental universe because you psychics. And at the end, Nate Gray says, you know what? Screw this. No more X-Men. And then he remakes the world.
Oh.
But he doesn't say it like that. He doesn't say no more mutants. It's not like a Wanda Maximoff situation.
Sure.
It's a little bit different. So we're in like an alternate universe.
A different kind of genocide.
Yeah. And it's not like humans were killed off. It's that everyone instead became a mutant. And so what if mutants were like the only thing available?
Default.
And yeah, but there's some like shady business going on.
So
And a
My
little
Hero Academia?
Yeah, kind of, but not nearly as lighthearted. Renee, I think given what I know about you, you'll probably dig all of this stuff. I think you'll be super into just like the over-the-top ridiculousness of it, and it's also X-Men, so there's always like someone brooding and some bad, clone character, but it's all around Nate Gray. He's like a focal character in the whole series.
I'm in.
So
I'm in it to win it. I'm like Jazz now.
I love it.
No, my question, which is definitely spawned because Renee and I were talking about romance novels before you came back on, is Nate Gray hot? Because the name Nathan Gray sounds like a super hot name.
He's so hot.
The way that he's so hot in this series. I'm going to send you a cover really quick, and you tell me whether or not you think he's hot.
I have his action figure, and his action figure is hot.
Oh, no, Renee, we're talking about a new Nate Gray. Okay, so here's an old Nate Gray I'm going to send you, okay?
Okay.
This is what he used to look like.
Wait, hold on.
I'm putting this in the Skype chat.
Chat, found it.
I don't even know how to find that again.
Wait, where is it?
Oh, yeah, there's a little thing in the bottom left-hand corner.
No, it didn't show up. There we go.
I said...
Okay.
That's what Nate Gray used to look like.
Okay, bangable. Okay. Go on.
Yes. He had an 8-pack and everything. Nate Gray in 2019 looks like this. Did it not work? Yeah, there you go.
Jesus.
Literally, Jesus.
He's Jesus.
I don't know how I feel about that.
That's hot Jesus, though.
He's hot Jesus.
So they made him like hipster daddy X-Man.
Yeah, that's exactly. And people are loving it. People are eating it up.
Of course they are. They gave Nightcrawler a beard and it became an internet sensation.
I know.
Is that Dark Nightcrawler or is Kurt alive again?
Kurt is alive. Actually, in this new Age of X-Men, he is a movie star.
He's not a priest?
It's called The Amazing...
they got rid of religion.
His whole thing with religion is like a piece of the story. I'm really excited about it. It's really good.
I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I kind of want to tie this guy up and cut his hair off like pull a full Delilah.
I know. Like, and especially if you look at that old
reference.
picture where he kind of is like, he's got the little streak in his hair like Rogue, and he just let it grow out. Like, what a dupe. Dye your hair, dude.
I don't think they ever explained why he has that.
No.
Aesthetics.
It's just
Yeah,
there.
because 90s.
And he's got the
So 90s.
one eye thing because it's Cyclops' power, but it's yellow. But it also can
Wait.
do psychic attacks.
This is very sexually confusing, Mike.
I know. Welcome to my whole life reading X-Men.
Also, randomly, does Hellion still have no hands?
So
What?
he hasn't been around for a while, and I don't think they ever retconned that. So but for the last time I saw him, he had just like metallic robot hands. Yeah. So Kara, long story short, this cool psychic dude who was like a super dickhead, he lost his hands during a fight during the Age of X, which was another story where there was like a fake world that had limits because whoever created it didn't have a lot of power, and so there was just all the X-Men were in this never-ending war where they were constantly stalemating against robots. Rogue and Magneto rekindled an old like relationship, and Hellion and X-23 were kind of dating, and he lost his hands right after or right before that. I can't remember. Like, he put his hands on a bomb to try to stop it, and you lose your hands when that happens.
Usually the rest of you.
The X-Men are crazy, yo.
Yeah. Also, from this from this conversation, I'm going to assume that they're all queer. Just,
I mean,
as a baseline assumption.
it's probably a safe assumption to say that most of the X-Men are bi. Like,
Look, everyone's sleeping with everybody. It's like the Big Brother
kinda.
house, you know?
yeah. Anyways, all right. So let's talk
Food
about
and manga.
Food and manga.
I don't know. Maybe we should just turn it into XXX-Men.
Oh no, I'd need to do a little bit more preparation just for my own sanity so that I could. We already did this 2 weeks ago. We had
That's
the
a wrap,
cyborg-
Xander.
Yeah. Let's talk about food and manga.
Don't let me talk about the X-Men. I'll just take it all into the sex dungeon.
It's just going to be called the SeXXX-Men episode, and